Hey there everyone, welcome back to FJX 2000 Productions and a brief intermission from the FJ Cruiser related content for some model train related content. Here we have some Kato models, a pair of SD90 43 Max. These are models of the San Luis and Rio Grande locomotives that I just thought are so cool. They're such a cool maroon color. They kind of have that flying grand logo on the side, but then you see in the little letters, the San Luis and Rio Grande. So good. I have been a fan of these models for a long time. A guy in my train club from back home had a pair of these. He moved to Oregon and I had to get myself a set. So when I saw a good deal come up on eBay, I just had to swipe these up. These are HO scale and they come DCC ready. The models that I got are DCC ready at least. His came with factory loc sound decoders, but I am a huge fan of Tsunami. So today we're gonna be installing a Tsunami2 decoder, the EMD2 specifically, one of these 21 pin decoders into one of these models. You can see one of these already has the lights going, and I've actually finished the install in number 115 right there. But we're gonna be doing the install today in its sister locomotive 116. So let's get started. Before we get going, I'll show you a little quick video of number 115 in action. Let's start it up. You could hear some cab chatter while it was starting up. We have our horn. We have our bell. Let's get our headlight on. And off we go. And we'll back it up. And I have one of the functions set up so I can do some special lighting. You can see it right down there, those Mars lights. Pretty cool feature, and I'll show you how to wire those up for yourself. So as we are getting started, I'll show you the major things that you'll need to do this install for yourself. First, I have my Tsunami2 TSU-21PNEM8 digital sound decoder. I chose the EMD2 diesel version of the decoder because it has sounds specific for an SD90 Mac. I have this, the TCS Wow Sound motherboard, specifically the 1622 AK-MB1, and you want to get the version that says this, high profile pins. This is the one that works specifically for Tsunami2 decoders. The regular one can be used with other decoders, like it says up there, pairs well with the WOW 121 diesel or EU 621 decoders, but because I'm using a Soundtrax decoder, you want the high profile pins so it can engage this board for the Tsunami. I'm going to be using the LEDs that come in the model already, but you will need one additional LED. So I like the Soundtrax LEDs, specifically in the golden white LED color. These are just your standard 3mm LEDs. So as long as it's that golden white color, a warm white, then it should be fine. And finally, we have this TCS WOW speaker, this universal SH1C speaker housing kit. I have mine already wired up and everything. It doesn't come wired up, but it does come with this 3D printed housing and the speaker. So you just have to put it in there. You can see I used silicone around the edges after getting it soldered in. And now we just have our wire leads that are ready to be wired to the motherboard. So these are the things that you'll need in addition to maybe some extra wires and tools to get the job done. But now let's open up the model. Step one of working on this model is really easy. You don't have to remove the couplers or anything to remove the shell. You simply pull up until the plastic tabs release. I'll pull from the back. There it goes, releases there. And then you can just work your way forward or even pull from the front. And just like that, our shell is removed. When I first got the model, it had some little dummy plugs in the 8-pin plug slots, so that way it could just operate on regular DC track. I just installed this random Digitrax decoder that I had laying around, so that way I could at least run and test the model, but we will not be using that. So I will go ahead and unplug our 8-pin plug for that. If you did want to do a simpler install, you could just utilize the 8-pin plug, but we're going to be upgrading this entire motherboard to a much more advanced one that allows for better lighting function control as well as keep alives. Next step is actually removing the motor and track leads. So we're going to remove these wires. These are the ones that act as your power pickups from the front and rear trucks. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect those from the factory motherboard. And they just are held in by little metal tabs right here. So I just go ahead and pull those right out. And now we just have to unscrew the factory motherboard to remove it from the model. It's held in by 2 Phillips head screws, so those are easy enough to remove. And just like that, we have freed the factory motherboard. You want to keep this in good condition. I still have my motherboard from the other model, but we're going to be reutilizing these LEDs, so keep those safe. The next step is we are going to wire up these motor terminals to our new motherboard. This one on this side, the engineer side of the locomotive, or right side, because this is looking forwards, just like they have the shell oriented. This one is our negative motor lead, and this one is our positive motor lead, the fireman side. And we have orange and gray wires that we are going to solder on that will then be soldered to the motherboard. So let me go ahead and get those attached. I'm going to trim off the little metal tabs right here, so that way they're just a solid wire to the straight metal part, not this part where it's bent and the metal originally attached to the factory motherboard through those holes. I'm gonna go ahead and snip those little parts. Trim that side. This side is especially short, so just be careful when trimming that. You don't want to make it too short, so that way you can't work on it. Here we go. Now we will solder our wires to them. Here we go. I have our orange and gray wires soldered on. I will now put some shrink tubing on there, going as far down as I can to make sure that they're isolated. As you can see, I have our motor leads shrink wrapped and all ready to go. Now we're going to take our AK-MB1 motherboard and we're going to bolt it on just where the factory one was. We're going to reuse the bolts in the factory motherboard. You can see that they line up so that way they'll bolt in the same location. And this one, as you can tell, has the keep alive wired in with these 4 resistors on the ends. Really cool. Now with the motherboard screwed into place, we're going to solder our orange motor lead to this side, the motor lead that you can see right here, marked orange, OR, and our gray motor lead to this side where it says gray on the motherboard, GRY. Whenever I'm soldering, I'll add a little bit of this Chip Quick, this SMD291 flux to the ends of the wires to help tin them. It just ends up giving a much better result when you actually go to solder something together. There we go. Those are soldered to the motherboard. Next step is to salvage the LEDs from our factory motherboard. So let me go ahead and I'll just heat these up with my soldering iron and detach them. Just be careful because it'll get a little hot. There we go. There's one of the LEDs salvaged right there. And we'll salvage this other one as well. And just like that, I have our LEDs from our factory motherboard. At this point, we're done with the factory motherboard. You can set that aside, but we're going to use these LEDs. For this next step, I'm gonna use the salvaged LED, the longer of the two, and we're gonna be soldering it right here. So that way, the negative end of the LED, the flag end, is the one attached to the number 1 there on the motherboard, and the other end, the positive end, is attached to the common blue, BL, on there. And that will be what becomes our LED for the Mars lights. You can see this plastic channel that runs down here, and that goes to the front where those little Mars lights are, down below the pilot. And we're going to make sure that we have that LED wired in right there. So let me go ahead and solder that into place. A quick little tangent that I'll go on about LEDs is it matters what type of LED you choose. For example, Soundtrax offers the golden white LEDs and their sunny white LEDs, and they don't really post pictures on their website of what these LEDs look like. But as you can see, I have written golden white LEDs are more for like the steam era, more yellow, and actually also matching this diesel era because it came out in the 90s and it was still using halogen lights. Versus sunny white, which is more the modern era LEDs, more of a bright white. But let me show you a difference between the two. Using a 9-volt battery and putting this resistor in line, I can touch the leads on this LED and show you what this looks like. This is the sunny white LED, more of a modern, just really plain white, but more of what you'd see on modern LED lighting units. Versus if we switch out the LED with the golden white, you can see more of that yellowy white. And that's what the factory LEDs on this model look like. So that's why I'm using this Soundtrax golden white LED. You need one extra LED because you need something long enough to wire on this back spot. Okay, at this point I have our LED wired up for the reverse light. I have our forward ditch lights wired up, and I went ahead and tinned the attachment points for our rails. So now we're going to attach our power pickups to their respective spots in the corners of this board. And if you need a guide on what gets wired where, the paper that comes with this has it all marked down, the track wires, which one goes where. But from this point, it's pretty straightforward what goes where. And just like that, we have our forward pickups wired in, our back truck pickups wired in. We have our light wired on, our reverse light. We have our front marker light on, and now we're going to wire the LED for the headlights. Originally, you can see this little plastic light column. That's what transmitted the light all the way to the front. And in the shell up here, is a similar one that would have sat right on top of this one, and that is how one LED did both the lights for the front marker lights as well as the headlights coming to the nose of the diesel right there. But to have separate LED functionality of both, we're actually going to trim this right about here, and then we're going to put an LED connecting directly in there, so that way light just goes straight from the LED to the headlights as its own separate light. And in case you need a guide for how to do this install yourself, I am using TCS-DCC.com. They have an installation guide for this model that I followed for this one that you're seeing, as well as the last model I did. And so it shows more specifically where to make this cut. But I'm just gonna use my track cutter because it's meant for metal and it can easily cut plastic. And we're gonna put it in here and we're just gonna cut that little light column, so that way we cut off about this much. You can see how much of it that I removed on the last model. So just before it bends this way, you can see it kind of dips downwards. I'm gonna trim it just before that point. All right, made the trim. That looks great. That's about as much as you want. And now what I like to do actually is I'm going to use some shrink tubing and put it over there like a sleeve, so that way it keeps the light from flooding out in other places and it'll help keep the LED in place. Okay, I have that shrink wrap tubing just on the stock of that plastic tube. And now I'm going to wire up our LED that'll act as our headlight. Normally I would have done blue and white wires, blue going to the common and white going to the forward where it says FWD. That's where we're gonna wire in that one, but I didn't have blue wire, so we're using a yellow wire. Okay, so far so good. LED is now attached. And because it goes to the shell, having a little bit of length and room for it to flex around is good. But it'll end up going into there, just like so. And that way it stays in place. I don't even have to like glue it or anything, just there's enough room in there, but not too tight that I can just slip it in and it'll work great when we put everything together. One additional note is that this motherboard is already wired up with everything it needs, so you don't need to do any resistors for any of the LEDs. You're not going to burn them out. And the last step is adding our speaker. Like I said, this is a 3D printed box from TCS and it comes with the speaker. I just wired up this to it previously, going through these little holes that are already in the plastic, makes it nice and easy. And now I just have to solder these leads onto the tabs that say speaker right here, these two. So let's go ahead and add that. And just like that, everything is now wired on our model. The only thing left is to add our decoder and test it all before we button everything up. All right, we have our Tsunami2 decoder. If we look really closely at it, let's see if I can get this to zoom in. You'll see that there's the 21 holes and there's one blank hole in the upper left-hand corner, and that corresponds with the pins. There's 21 pins and there's one missing one right here. So when we install it so that way the blank spot lines up. And that means that we install it facing this way. And just like that, it's installed, press down. That's why you use the high pin version of the TCS AK-MB1. So again, make sure you get the high profile pin version, and that way it engages all the pins on this Tsunami2 decoder. But now let's put it on the track and test it out. Okay, I have our track powered up and in place. Let's go ahead and put it on the track. Oh, that's a good sign. Speaker is working great. Because this is straight out of the factory packaging, it's probably set to an address of number 3. So I'll go ahead and on our throttle, I'll put in address number 3. And let's see if it works. Yes, it does. We're going to adjust the settings to match the other model since they're twin engines and they should sound the same. And I think the default motor sound isn't the right one that we want, so I'll make some adjustments in the CVs later. But looks like it's working. We got forward. Oh yeah, that's right. For some reason, however it's wired, it's a little bit reversed, but it is working. It runs a little smoother if all the wheels are on the track. There we go. Yeah. Well, we got our forward and reverse. Let's make sure our LEDs are working. There's one. Oh, there's the other one. And I still have to adjust the settings so that way our ditch light one works. But let me see if it works right here. Ah, there we go. All our LEDs are working. So now it's just a matter of putting it all together and buttoning things up. Here's just a closer look of those LEDs. Again, this is the one that'll become our headlight LED. And you can see how, the light is being transmitted through this plastic channel for our front ditch lights right down here. So that works perfect. And for the rear light, you want it to be positioned something like so that way when the reverse light is on, it is in the right place to get the plastic channel in the shell. There's a little light column right there you can see going from where that LED is all the way to those reverse lights. So just make sure that that is all in the right position so things light up properly. The final thing we need to do before putting it all back together is figuring out where to mount the speaker. I like to use this foam double-sided sticky tape stuff. It kind of acts as a cushion so that way there's no vibration with the sound on the shell. And I just install a couple little strips on the back. That's more than enough to hold it in place, but if we need to take it off, it won't be too adhered. And it will end up going something like this up in the shell, kind of up and above where this little light goes. You just want it up and out of the way, but it'll go up towards the front of the cab, just like so. So I'll put that in and then we will put our little LED in that little slot right there where the shrink tubing is. And then I will seat it down. We'll make sure that it's all running, but at this point we're pretty much there. The last thing I'll do before buttoning everything up, I have our speaker adhered up there to the roof of the cab. I put this piece of black electrical tape right here, and this will help decrease light spillover so that way we're not getting headlight light out the ditch lights. So now we can go ahead and seat everything together. I'm just slowly and steadily making sure all the clips are engaging and everything is settling down without hitting other things. There we go. There we go. Front and back, clipped down. Okay, well, let's put it back on the track and make sure it works. Sound is sounding great. Let's check our headlight. Oh yes, look at that, that looks perfect. Let's check the reverse light. Also lighting up perfectly. No need to change that at all. You can see it lighting up just fine back there. And let's test our ditch lights. So I'm sure that they'll be good. Nice. Well, that's looking good. Let's edit some CVs and then give this thing a spin. All right, here we go. Final test. We have it on the track, all buttoned up. Let's turn it on. Sounding great. Let's get the headlight on. Perfect. Let's get it going forward. Nice and smooth. Love to see it. We'll get it going backwards. And I already checked the tail light is working. All the auto sounds are working. And we can check that ditch light again. There we go. Well, there you have it. An install of a Tsunami2 decoder into the SD90 43 Mac locomotive from Kato. Here are those models sitting there idling, and I'll just give a couple closing remarks. Again, I used the Tsunami2 decoder, and I chose specifically the EMD2 decoder because it has sound effects specifically that work for this type of locomotive, an SD90 43. The prime mover is this EMD 710G 16 cylinder. Originally, they were going to put a different engine in these, hence why they're called an SD90, but because it ended up being such an unreliable engine, they stuck with the same motor that they put in other locomotives, like the SD70s, and that ended up being that prime mover, the EMD 710G 16 cylinder one. One of the cool things you can do with Tsunami decoders is you can change the pitch volume, so that way the prime movers between these two matched locomotives will sound slightly different. And you can change other sound effects, like you could change the horns, so that way the horn is different between the two locomotives, like right here. I did two different horns for the two different models. I adjusted the rate of flash for the ditch lights so that way they would match, but I could change that. There's just lots of cool customization you can do with Tsunami2 decoders. So make sure that you check out Tsunami2, check out these decoders. Hopefully this install helped you out, and I'll leave a link in the description below for that website, TCS, if you want to see the install instructions that I followed for installing these decoders. And one of the other cool things that I said is that these have keep alives. So sure enough, we can take it off the track and you can see the lights are still on and the audio turns down, but it is still alive. So if we are running over rough track, in theory, this will keep it going. But with these quality models and all the power pickups they have, power dying isn't really a huge concern, but still a cool functionality that they have keep alives in them too. But anyways, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Have a good day.